The security guard's hand came down hard on the back of the boy's neck. Not a slap, a grip. The kind meant to freeze you in place while everyone watches. 14-year-old Marcus didn't cry out. He'd learned not to. His thin shoulders stiffened under the fluorescent lights of the luxury car dealership. His fingers still wrapped around the rag he'd been using to wipe down the silver McLaren 720S in the showroom. The same car he'd been told, very clearly, not to touch. "I knew it," the guard said, loud enough for the Saturday afternoon crowd to hear. "I knew something was off the second you walked in here." Marcus's throat tightened. He could feel every pair of eyes in the room turning toward him, women in designer sunglasses, men in tailored suits, a couple taking photos near a red Ferrari, all of them stopping, all of them staring. The air smelled like leather and new carpet and expensive cologne, and Marcus suddenly felt like he was choking on it. "I wasn't stealing," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely escaping his chest. "I was just what?" the guard interrupted, yanking him backward, away from the car. "Just putting your dirty hands all over a $400,000 vehicle. You think we don't notice kids like you coming in here, casing the place?" Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. Kids like you, he knew what that meant. He looked down at his hands. They weren't dirty. He'd washed them twice in the gas station bathroom before coming here, scrubbed under the nails, used the last bit of soap from a dispenser that barely worked. But the guard wasn't talking about dirt. The dealership manager appeared from the back office, a tall man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name tag read Gregory Hale, General Manager. He walked slowly, his shoes clicking on the polished marble floor, taking his time like he wanted everyone to see him handle this. He stopped a few feet away, hands clasped in front of him, looking Marcus up and down the way you'd inspect something broken. "What's going on here, David?" Hale asked the guard, though his eyes never left Marcus. "Caught him touching the McLaren, sir," David said, tightening his grip. "No adult supervision, no appointment. Just wandering around like he owns the place." Hale's smile widened, thin and cold. "Is that so?" Marcus tried to speak, but his voice caught. He forced the words out. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was cleaning it. There was a smudge on the door and I thought—" "You thought," Hale repeated slowly, like the words themselves were offensive. He stepped closer. Close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne, something sharp and expensive that made his eyes water. "You thought you'd walk into my dealership, put your hands on a car worth more than most people make in 5 years, and what? We'd thank you." Someone in the crowd laughed. A short, cruel sound that cut through the air. Marcus's face burned. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to run. But David's hand was still on his neck, and his legs felt like they'd turned to stone. "I'm calling the police," Hale said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "We've had enough of this, kids coming in here thinking they can—" "Wait." The voice came from behind them, low, calm. The kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Everyone turned. A man stood near the entrance, mid-50s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed back. He wasn't dressed like the other customers. No Rolex, no designer labels, but something about the way he stood, the way he looked at them, made the room go quiet. "What's the problem here?" the man asked, walking forward. His eyes moved from Hale to David to Marcus, taking in the scene like he was reading a page. Hale straightened, irritation flashing across his face. "This doesn't concern you, sir. We're handling a situation." "It concerns me if you're about to call the police on a kid for touching a car," the man said evenly. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his gaze steady. "What did he do? Scratch it? Break something?" "He put his hands on it," David said, like that explained everything. The man looked at Marcus, really looked at him. Not the way Hale had, like he was searching for something to confirm his suspicions, but the way someone looks when they actually want to see you. "Did you scratch it?" he asked. Marcus shook his head quickly. "No, sir, I was just wiping off a smudge. I didn't mean to." "So he cleaned it," the man said, turning back to Hale. "And you're calling the police?" Hale's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, you don't understand the situation. We have policies, we have standards. And we don't appreciate." "I understand perfectly," the man said, his voice dropping a degree. "I understand you've got a kid who saw something that needed fixing and fixed it. And instead of saying thank you, you grabbed him like he's a criminal." The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable. Marcus could hear his own breathing, shallow and fast. He didn't know who this man was, but something about him made Hale hesitate. Made David's grip loosen just slightly, but Hale recovered quickly. He straightened his tie, his smile returning, colder now. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but unless you're here to make a purchase, I'm going to have to ask you to step back." "This is a private matter." The man didn't move. "Private matter," he repeated softly, "in the middle of your showroom, in front of all these people." "You're making it pretty public." Hale's face flushed. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but—" "Let the kid go," the man said, not a request, a statement. David looked at Hale, uncertain. Hale stared at the man, something shifting behind his eyes. Annoyance, confusion, a flicker of something else, but he nodded, slowly, and David let go. Marcus stumbled forward, catching himself, his neck aching where the guard's fingers had pressed. He looked at the man, trying to find words, but nothing came. The man gave him a small nod, then turned and walked toward the exit. Just like that. No fanfare, no explanation. He pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the sunlight outside. Hale watched him go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to Marcus, his smile gone. "Get out," he said quietly. "And don't come back." Marcus didn't wait. He turned and walked as fast as he could toward the doors, his hands shaking, his chest tight. He could feel everyone watching, could hear the whispers starting up again behind him. He pushed through the doors and stepped into the heat of the afternoon, the sun blinding after the cool fluorescence inside. He kept walking, across the parking lot. Past the rows of gleaming cars he'd never be able to afford. Past the man in the dark jacket who stood leaning against a black sedan, watching him. "You okay?" the man asked as Marcus passed. Marcus stopped. He didn't know why. He should have kept going, should have gotten as far away as possible, but something made him turn. "Yeah," he said, though his voice cracked. "Thank you." For saying something, the man nodded. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "Marcus," the man repeated like he was filing it away. "You live around here?" Marcus hesitated. That question always made him hesitate. "Sort of," he said, which was true. He lived around here, just not in a house. The man studied him for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He held it out. "If you ever need anything, call that number." "All right." Marcus took the card, confused. He glanced down at it. Black print, simple, a name, a number, nothing else. "Why?" he asked. The man smiled just a little. "Because you cleaned a car that didn't belong to you, and you did it because you thought it needed to be done. That tells me something." He opened the door to his sedan, paused, then looked back. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." And then he was gone. The engine started smoothly, and the car pulled out of the lot, disappearing into traffic. Marcus stood there holding the card, staring at the name printed on it. He didn't recognize it, didn't know what it meant. He shoved it into his pocket and started walking. The walk back felt longer than usual. Marcus's legs ached. His neck throbbed where David's fingers had dug in. But more than the physical pain, there was something else. A weight pressing down on his chest. Shame. Even though he'd done nothing wrong, even though he knew he'd done nothing wrong, that's how shame worked. It didn't need truth, it just needed an audience. He walked through the downtown streets, past shops he'd never be able to enter, past restaurants where the smell of food made his stomach twist. He'd eaten that morning. Half a bagel someone had thrown away outside a coffee shop. Still good, still edible. He'd learned not to be picky. Learned that hunger had a way of changing your definition of acceptable. By the time he reached the underpass where he'd been sleeping, the sun was starting to set. Orange light stretched across the concrete pillars, painting shadows that grew longer by the minute. Marcus climbed the small embankment to his spot, a corner hidden behind a support beam where the ground was relatively flat. His backpack was still there, still zipped, still untouched. Small victories. He sat down, his back against the cold concrete, and pulled out the business card again. The name meant nothing to him. Richard Crane, just a name, just 2 words. But something about the way the man had looked at him, the way he'd stepped in without hesitation, without fear, made Marcus wonder. Made him think that maybe, just maybe, there were people in the world who saw things differently, who didn't look at a kid in worn-out shoes and see a problem, who saw something else. He didn't know what, but he wanted to. 6 months ago, Marcus had lived in a house. A small house on the east side of the city, with peeling paint and a front porch that sagged in the middle, but it was home. His mom worked 2 jobs. Cashier at a grocery store during the day, scanning items with quick, practiced movements. always smiling at customers even when they didn't smile back. Cleaning offices at night, pushing a cart full of supplies through empty buildings, vacuuming floors that no one would notice were clean. She came home smelling like bleach and exhaustion, but she always smiled when she saw him, always asked about school, always made sure there was dinner, even if it was just rice and beans. Marcus remembered the way she'd hum while she cooked, old songs, songs from her childhood from a time before everything got hard. She'd stand at the stove, stirring a pot, and the sound would fill their small kitchen, warm and familiar. He'd do his homework at the table, listening, pretending not to notice when she winced, when she pressed a hand to her side when her cough interrupted the melody. Then she got sick. It started with a cough, just a cough, nothing serious, everyone gets coughs, but this one didn't go away, it got worse, deeper, wetter. Then the cough turned into something else. Something that made her so tired she could barely stand, something that made her hands shake when she tried to tie her shoes. She kept working anyway, kept pushing, because that's what she did. That's what she'd always done, until one night she didn't come home. Marcus had waited on the porch, watching the street, watching the sun go down, telling himself she was just running late. The grocery store sometimes kept her longer. Sometimes there was inventory. Sometimes the manager needed her to cover someone's shift. He told himself all of these things as the sky turned orange, then purple, then black. He told himself these things as the street lights flickered on, casting yellow pools across the pavement. He told himself these things as neighbors walked past, glancing at him sitting alone, saying nothing. At midnight, the police came, 2 officers, a man and a woman. They knocked on the door. Asked if his parents were home. Marcus told them his mom was at work. They asked where. He told them. They looked at each other. Then they asked him to come with them. The hospital smelled wrong, like chemicals trying to cover up something worse. They led him through white hallways, past rooms filled with beeping machines and low moans, until they reached a room at the end of a corridor. His mom was there, lying in a bed, tubes in her arms, monitors attached to her chest. Her eyes were closed, her face was pale, too pale. The doctor said it was pneumonia. Said she'd waited too long to come in. Said there were complications, words that meant nothing and everything at the same time. Marcus didn't understand half of them, didn't want to understand. He just wanted his mom to open her eyes, to sit up, to tell him everything was going to be okay the way she always did. She lasted 3 days. 3 days of sitting by her bed, holding her hand, listening to the machines beep and hiss, watching her chest rise and fall, slower and slower until it stopped. They asked him if he wanted to say goodbye. He didn't know how, didn't know what words could possibly be enough. So he just held her hand and whispered, "I love you," over and over until a nurse gently touched his shoulder and told him it was time to go. No life insurance, no savings, no family. The hospital's social worker tried to help, tried to find relatives, tried to navigate the system. But the system moved slowly and Marcus's landlord didn't. He gave Marcus a week to clear out. A week to pack up everything his mother had worked for, everything they'd built together, and leave. Marcus packed what he could carry in a backpack, clothes, a photo of his mom, a book she'd given him for his birthday. The rest he left, didn't have a choice. On the last day, he stood in the empty house, looking at the walls where pictures used to hang, the kitchen where she used to hum, the table where they used to eat dinner together. Then he walked out. Closed the door and didn't look back. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked, slept in parks at first. Found a bench near some trees, curled up with his backpack as a pillow and tried to sleep through the sounds of the city at night. The sirens, the shouting. The footsteps that sometimes came too close. After a few nights, someone told him about the underpass, said it was safer, said the police didn't bother you there as long as you kept quiet, so he went. He learned quickly, learned which places were safe, which weren't, learned to keep moving during the day so no one asked questions, learned to stay invisible. Learned that if you looked like you had somewhere to be, people didn't notice you. Learned that public libraries had bathrooms where you could wash up. That gas stations sometimes threw away food that was still good. That if you kept your clothes clean and your hair neat, you could blend in, could pretend. But he couldn't stay invisible in school. The other kids noticed when he wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. Noticed when he didn't have lunch. Noticed when he fell asleep in class because he'd been up all night trying to stay warm. The teachers tried to help, Mrs. Patterson, his English teacher, started leaving granola bars on his desk. Mr. Chen, his math teacher, asked if everything was okay at home, but there were forms. Questions, systems, and Marcus knew how systems worked. They took you, put you somewhere with strangers who didn't care, so he stopped going, just stopped showing up. It was easier. He spent his days walking, watching, learning. He liked cars, always had. Used to watch YouTube videos with his mom, back when they had internet, learning about engines, transmissions, how things worked. She didn't understand it. Didn't care about horsepower or torque or 0 to 60 times, but she liked watching him get excited, liked seeing him happy. So she'd sit next to him on the couch, her arm around his shoulders, watching videos about cars she'd never be able to afford, just because it made him smile. He'd memorized the specs of 100 different models, could tell you the horsepower, torque, 0 to 60 on almost anything that rolled past, could identify a car by its headlights, by the sound of its engine. It was a stupid hobby for a kid with nothing, but it was his. One of the few things he had left that felt like it belonged to him, that connected him to who he used to be. Before everything fell apart. That's why he'd gone into the dealership. He'd seen the McLaren through the window, the sunlight catching the curves of the body, and he couldn't help himself. He just wanted to see it up close, just wanted to stand next to something beautiful, something perfect, something that represented everything the world could be when it wasn't cruel. And when he saw the smudge on the door, a fingerprint smeared across the polished silver, it felt wrong, like someone had disrespected it, so he'd wiped it off. That's all. That's all he'd done. And they'd treated him like a criminal. Now, sitting under the overpass, Marcus pulled his knees to his chest and closed his eyes, tried not to think about the way everyone had stared. The way the guard had grabbed him, the way Hale had smiled, like Marcus was exactly what he'd expected, exactly what he'd been looking for, confirmation of something ugly. But then he thought about the other man, Richard Crane, the way he'd stepped in, the way he'd stood between Marcus and Hale without hesitation, without knowing Marcus. Without knowing anything except that something was wrong, and he'd fixed it, or tried to. That counted for something. Marcus fell asleep holding the business card. 3 days later, Marcus stood outside a different luxury dealership. This one sold Porsches and Audis, all lined up behind glass walls, gleaming under showroom lights. He wasn't going inside. He'd learned his lesson, but he liked to look, liked to imagine. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, his breath fogging the window, and stared at a midnight blue Porsche 911 Turbo S. Perfect lines, perfect paint, perfect everything. "Can I help you?" Marcus jumped, spinning around. A woman stood behind him, early 30s, wearing a black pantsuit and heels. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't scowling either, just looking. Her expression was neutral, curious maybe, but not hostile. "Sorry," Marcus said quickly, backing away. "I was just looking," the woman finished. She tilted her head, studying him. "You like cars?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Which one?" "The 911, Marcus said, pointing through the glass. Turbo S 640 horsepower, 3.7-liter twin-turbo flat six, 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. The woman's eyebrows lifted. "You know your stuff," Marcus shrugged. "I read a lot," she smiled, just a little. "You want to come inside, see it up close?" Marcus's stomach dropped. This felt like a trap, like the last time, like something that would end badly. I don't have money, I'm not buying anything." "I didn't ask if you were buying anything," she said. "I asked if you wanted to see it." He followed her inside, his heart pounding, every instinct screaming at him to run, but something about her tone, something about the way she'd asked. Like she genuinely wanted to know, not like she was testing him, not like she was waiting for him to make a mistake so she could prove something, just asking. She led him straight to the 911, unlocked the driver's side door and pulled it open. "Go ahead," she said. "Sit inside." Marcus stared at her, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. But she just gestured toward the car, patient. Slowly, carefully, like he was handling something fragile, Marcus slid into the driver's seat. The leather was soft, impossibly soft. The steering wheel fit perfectly in his hands, wrapped in Alcantara, textured under his fingers. He could see every gauge, every button, every detail, the digital display, the sport chrono timer. The drive mode selector, it was perfect, more perfect than he'd imagined. "How does it feel?" the woman asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Like a spaceship," Marcus whispered. She laughed. A real laugh, not mocking, not cruel, just genuine. Yeah, it kind of does. She was quiet for a moment, watching him run his hands over the steering wheel, taking it all in. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus, I'm Nina, she paused. Can I ask you something? He nodded, his guard going back up. Where are your parents? The question hit harder than it should have. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He stared at the dashboard, at the perfect gauges, at the perfect everything, and felt the weight of the answer pressing down on him. She's gone, he said quietly. My mom, she died. Nina's expression softened, not pity, something else. Understanding, maybe. I'm sorry, she said, and she sounded like she meant it. Marcus didn't respond, didn't know what to say. He stared at the dashboard, his throat tight, his eyes burning. You have somewhere to stay? Nina asked gently. Marcus shook his head. She was quiet for a long moment. The showroom around them hummed with quiet activity, other salespeople talking to customers, phones ringing in the distance. But in this small space, sitting in this perfect car, it felt separate, like the world had shrunk down to just the two of them. Nina pulled out her phone, turned away, and made a call. Marcus couldn't hear what she said. She spoke low, turned away, her voice too quiet to catch. When she hung up, she looked back at him, her expression thoughtful. Come on, she said. Let's get you something to eat. They went to a diner 2 blocks away, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a counter with spinning stools. Nina ordered a burger, fries, a milkshake. Marcus ate like he hadn't seen food in days, which was close to true. He tried to pace himself, tried to eat slowly, but his body had other ideas. Nina didn't say anything. Didn't watch him with that uncomfortable pity he'd seen in other people's eyes. She just let him eat. When he was done, she slid a piece of paper across the table. An address. Written in neat handwriting. There's a shelter here, she said. It's safe. They'll give you a bed, food, and they don't ask a lot of questions. I know the woman who runs it. Her name's Carol. Tell her I sent you. Marcus looked at the paper, then at Nina. Why are you helping me? Nina smiled, sad, tired, like she was remembering something, because someone helped me once. When I needed it, she stood, left money on the table for the bill and a generous tip, and touched his shoulder. Take care of yourself, Marcus. He went to the shelter that night. The address led him to a 2-story building on the east side, painted pale yellow with a small garden out front. It didn't look like what he'd expected. Didn't look institutional. Didn't look cold. It looked like a house, an old house, but a house. Carol answered the door. She was older, maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. You must be Marcus, she said, like she'd been expecting him. Nina called, come in. The inside was warm, clean. It smelled like soup, like something homemade. Carol showed him around. Showed him the common room with a TV and some couches. Showed him the kitchen where residents could make food. Showed him the small bedroom he'd be sharing with 2 other boys. Twin beds. Clean sheets, a window. Rules are simple, Carol said. Respect everyone, no drugs, no violence. You go to school or you work. Those are the conditions. Can you do that? Marcus nodded. Good, Carol said. Dinner's at 6. Bathrooms down the hall. Get settled. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in months, Marcus stared at the ceiling. He could hear the other boys breathing, could hear the sounds of the city outside, but it was different, muted, safe. He pulled out the business card Richard Crane had given him and looked at it again in the dim light coming through the window. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if this would last. But for tonight, he had a bed, and that was enough. The next morning, Carol sat him down in the kitchen. She poured him coffee, which he'd never really liked, but he drank it anyway because it was warm and because she'd made it for him. Nina told me a little about you, Carol said. About your mom. I'm sorry, Marcus. That's not something anyone should have to go through alone. Marcus stared into his coffee. Thanks. She also told me you know a lot about cars, Carol continued. That true, Marcus shrugged. I guess. There's a program, Carol said. Through the community college, auto mechanics, basics, but it's a start. They take referrals from shelters. I can get you in if you're interested. Marcus looked up. Really? Really, Carol said. But you have to commit, you have to show up, you have to do the work. Can you do that? Yes, Marcus said, no hesitation. Yes, Carol smiled. Good. I'll make the call. 2 weeks later, Marcus sat in a classroom at the community college, surrounded by other students, most of them older, learning the basics of automotive repair. How to change oil, How to replace brake pads, how to diagnose simple problems. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't sports cars and supercars, but it was real. And it was his. He threw himself into it. Absorbed everything. Stayed late to practice. Asked questions. Read the textbooks cover to cover. The instructor, a gruff man named Tom with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails, noticed. "You've got a knack for this," Tom said one afternoon, watching Marcus reassemble a carburetor. "You ever think about doing this for real?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "Maybe you should," Tom said. "Kids like you who actually care, who actually want to learn, they're rare. Don't waste it." Marcus didn't waste it. He finished the program in 3 months. Got his certificate. Carol helped him get his GED, helped him fill out applications, helped him practice interview questions. And one day, standing in the shelter's office, she handed him a phone. "Someone wants to talk to you," she said. Marcus took the phone. "Hello, Marcus." The voice was familiar, calm, steady. "It's Richard Crane. We met a few months ago." "At the dealership." Marcus's heart jumped. "I remember. Carol tells me you've been working hard, that you finished the auto mechanics program." "Yes, sir." "Good," Richard said. "I have a proposition for you. I'd like you to come work for me, part-time, helping out in the service bays, learning properly. What do you say?" Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This didn't happen. Things like this didn't happen to kids like him. "Marcus," Richard's voice was patient. "You still there?" "Yes," Marcus managed. "Yes, I'm here. So what do you say?" "Yes," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "Yes, thank you." "Good," Richard said. "Come by tomorrow, 10 a.m. We'll get you started." The next morning, Marcus stood outside the dealership where everything had started, where he'd been grabbed, humiliated, thrown out, his stomach twisted. Part of him wanted to run, but he pushed through the doors anyway. The showroom looked the same. Same cars, same marble floors, same expensive smell. But it felt different, or maybe he felt different. A woman at the front desk looked up, smiled. "You must be Marcus. Mr. Crane is expecting you. He's in the service area, through those doors." Marcus walked through, into the service bays. The real heart of the dealership, where the work happened. Richard stood near a workbench talking to a mechanic. When he saw Marcus, he smiled. Right on time. "Good." He walked over, held out his hand. Marcus shook it. Richard's grip was firm, real. "Let me show you around," Richard said. He introduced Marcus to the team, showed him the equipment, the tools. The cars in various states of repair. "You'll start by observing," Richard said. "Watch, learn, ask questions. Once you've got the basics down, we'll get you working." "Sound good?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "And Marcus," Richard added, his expression serious. "What happened before with Hale, that's not how we do things here. Everyone gets treated with respect." "Everyone understood," Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "Good," Richard said. "Let's get to work." 2 months later, Marcus stood in the service bay, his hands covered in grease, helping one of the senior mechanics replace a transmission on a BMW M5. He was still learning. Still making mistakes, but he was learning. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was building something, like he was moving forward instead of just surviving. One afternoon, Gregory Hale walked into the service area. He didn't see Marcus at first, didn't notice him working quietly near the back. Hale was arguing with one of the service managers, his voice sharp, irritated. "I don't care what Crane says. I've been running this location for 7 years. He can't just, he can." Richard's voice cut through the room like a knife. He emerged from his office, calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "And he did." Hale turned, his face flushing. "Richard, this is absurd. You're letting some complaints from customers dictate." "It's not the complaints," Richard said evenly. "It's the pattern. The way you treat people, the way you run this place." He gestured around the service bay. "You turned this showroom into a place where people feel judged, where kids get grabbed and humiliated for touching a car. That's not the business I want to run." Hale's jaw tightened. That kid," Richard interrupted, his voice dropping, "is standing right there." He pointed. Hale turned, saw Marcus. Recognition flickered across his face, then disbelief, then anger. His face went white, then red. "You're joking." "Marcus works for me now," Richard said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And he's better at diagnosing engine problems than half the people you hired. So when I think about who belongs here and who doesn't, it's not a difficult choice." Hale's face contorted. "You're firing me over that?" I'm firing you because you forgot what this business is supposed to be about, Richard said quietly, but every word landed with weight. It's supposed to be about people loving cars, about making them feel welcome, about treating them with respect. You forgot that. You made this place hostile. You made customers uncomfortable. You made employees uncomfortable. So yes, you're done. Hale opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the room like he was searching for support, found none. The mechanics had stopped working. Everyone was watching, silent, waiting. Hale's face burned with humiliation, the same humiliation he'd inflicted on Marcus. Security will escort you out, Richard said. Clean out your desk. You have 20 minutes. 2 security guards appeared. Different guards, not David. They stood on either side of Hale, waiting. Hale looked at Richard, at Marcus. His expression twisted between rage and disbelief. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, the guards following. The room stayed silent until he was gone. Richard turned to the room. Anyone else have a problem with how we treat people here? No one spoke. Good, Richard said. Get back to work. The mechanics returned to their stations. The noise of the service bay resumed. Richard walked over to Marcus, who stood frozen, his hands still greasy, his heart pounding. You okay? Richard asked. Marcus nodded. He didn't trust his voice. That wasn't about revenge, Richard said quietly. That was about standards, about building the kind of place where people like you feel welcome, where talent gets recognized. Where respect isn't optional. He paused. You understand? Yes, sir, Marcus managed. Good, Richard said and walked back to his office. That night, Richard took Marcus to a small Italian restaurant downtown. They sat in a booth by the window, and Richard ordered too much food, the way adults do when they're trying to make a point. Pasta, breadsticks, salad, wine for Richard, water for Marcus. Halfway through the meal, Richard set down his fork and looked at Marcus. How are you doing, really? Marcus thought about it. About the shelter, about Carol, about the classes, about the job, about the fact that for the first time in months he didn't feel like he was just surviving. Better, he said. I'm doing better, Richard nodded. Good, that's good. He paused, his expression thoughtful. I want you to know something, Marcus. You're going to have opportunities now, real ones. But opportunities don't mean anything if you don't take them seriously. You understand? Marcus nodded. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you, Richard continued, his voice firm but not unkind. I'm doing this because I see something in you, something that most people don't have. You care. About the work, about doing it right, that's rare, don't lose that. Marcus's throat tightened. I won't. And another thing, Richard said, leaning back. When you finish your GAD, if you want, there's a program. Technical school, automotive engineering, real training, I'll cover it, full ride, but only if you want it. Marcus stared at him. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. You do that, I do that, Richard said simply, but only if you're serious. Only if you're willing to put in the work. I am, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. I want it. Then it's yours, Richard said. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. On the way out, Richard handed Marcus an envelope. Open it when you get back to the shelter, he said. Marcus did. Inside was a check. Enough to cover the first and last month's rent on a small apartment, and a note written in neat handwriting. Everyone deserves a place to call home. R.C. Marcus sat on his bed in the shelter, holding the check, staring at the numbers. It was more money than he'd ever held, more than his mom had ever been able to save. He thought about her. About the way she used to hum while she cooked. About the way she'd sit next to him on the couch, watching videos about cars she'd never be able to afford just because it made him happy. She would have liked Richard, he thought, would have liked knowing someone saw him, really saw him. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the showroom of Richard's flagship dealership, wearing a clean uniform, a name tag pinned to his chest. He was still part-time. Still in school, working toward his technical degree. But he was there, present, building something. A woman walked in with her daughter, a girl about 8 years old, eyes wide as she stared at the cars. She ran up to a red Audi R8, pressing her hands against the glass, her breath fogging the surface. Careful, sweetie, the woman said nervously, reaching for her daughter. Don't touch, Marcus walked over, smiling. It's okay, he said gently. She can touch it, that's what they're here for. The woman looked at him, surprised, uncertain. Marcus knelt down next to the little girl. You like cars? He asked. She nodded eagerly, her eyes bright. Me too, Marcus said. Want me to tell you about this one? Her face lit up. Yes, Marcus started talking, about the engine, the speed, the way it handled, about how it was made, about what made it special. The little girl listened, eyes wide, hanging on every word. Her mother watched, something soft in her expression, something grateful. When they left, the woman thanked him. "You're really good with kids," she said. Marcus shrugged. "I just remember what it was like, wanting to be close to something beautiful, not being allowed." She smiled. "Well, you made her day." As they walked out, Marcus stood in the middle of the showroom, surrounded by cars that used to feel like they belonged to a different world. A world he could only look at through glass, but now he was inside. And it wasn't because someone had given him permission, it was because someone had given him a chance, and he'd taken it. Had worked for it, had earned it. Richard appeared beside him, hands in his pockets, watching the woman and her daughter leave through the glass doors. "You did good," he said. Marcus nodded. "Thanks. You know," Richard said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking, when you finish your technical degree, there's going to be a position opening up. Service manager. Overseeing the whole operation, I think you'd be good at it." Marcus turned, staring at him. "Service manager, I'm 19. So," Richard said, "age doesn't mean anything if you know what you're doing, and you know what you're doing." He paused. "But that's a few years away. For now, just keep learning, keep growing. The rest will follow." Marcus felt something swell in his chest. Something he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or belief. The belief that maybe things could actually work out. That maybe the world wasn't just cruel. That maybe sometimes if you kept going, if you kept trying, if you kept caring, someone would notice. Someone would help. Someone would give you the chance you needed to become who you were supposed to be. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything," Richard smiled. "Don't thank me. Just keep being you, that's all I ask." That night Marcus sat alone in his small apartment, the one Richard had helped him get. It wasn't much. One room, a bed, a table, a small kitchen. A window that looked out over the city. But it was his name on the lease, his key in the lock, his home. He pulled out the business card Richard had given him that first day. The one he'd kept in his pocket all this time, even after getting Richard's number saved in the phone Carol had helped him get. He stared at the name, the number, the simple black print. He still didn't fully understand why Richard had helped him. Didn't know what he'd done to deserve it, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't waste it, wouldn't let it slip away. Wouldn't become another statistic, another kid who had a chance and lost it. He'd work. He'd learn. He'd prove that Richard's faith wasn't misplaced, that he was worth the investment, worth the risk. Marcus set the card on his small table and looked around his apartment. At the walls he could paint if he wanted. At the space that was his. At the life he was building piece by piece, day by day. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was his, and that meant everything. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this story, I need you to understand something. The world is full of people who will look at you and decide in a single glance what you're worth. They'll see where you come from, what you're wearing, the dirt under your nails or the address you don't have. And they'll decide you don't belong, that you're not good enough, that you're a problem to be removed, a threat to be neutralized. Something less than human. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Your worth isn't defined by where you sleep at night, or how much money sits in your bank account, or whether someone in a suit thinks you belong in their showroom. Your worth is defined by what you do when no one's watching. By whether you see something broken and try to fix it, even when it doesn't benefit you. By whether you care, even when caring costs you something, even when caring gets you grabbed, gets you humiliated, gets you thrown out. Marcus didn't ask for what happened to him, didn't deserve to lose his mother to a disease that could have been treated if they'd had insurance. If they'd had money, if they'd had access to the things people with power take for granted. He didn't deserve to be humiliated in front of strangers for the crime of touching a car, of cleaning it, of caring about something beautiful, but he survived. And more than that, he kept caring, he kept trying, he kept showing up day after day, even when the world told him he was worthless. Even when every message he received said he didn't matter. He kept being the kind of person who saw a smudge on a car and wiped it off, not for reward, not for recognition, but because it needed to be done. And eventually, someone noticed. Someone who understood that potential isn't about where you start. It's not about the house you grew up in, or the school you went to, or the connections your parents had. It's about what you do with the chances you're given. It's about whether you work when no one's forcing you to, whether you learn when no one's teaching you, whether you care when no one else does. So if you're out there, struggling, feeling invisible, feeling like the world has already decided you don't matter, like your story's already been written and the ending is tragic and there's nothing you can do to change it, don't believe it. Don't accept it. Don't let their judgment become your truth. Keep caring. Keep showing up. Keep fixing the things that are broken, even when no one asks you to, even when it gets you in trouble. Even when it seems pointless. Because eventually, if you keep going, if you refuse to let the world break you, the right person will notice. The right door will open. The right chance will come. And when it does, everything changes. The people who tried to throw Marcus away, who grabbed him and judged him and told him he didn't belong, who saw a kid in worn-out shoes and decided he was a criminal, they lost. Not because Marcus fought them, not because he got revenge, not because he proved them wrong in some dramatic confrontation. They lost because he refused to become what they believed he was. He stayed kind, he stayed curious, he stayed determined. And that's the real victory, not revenge, not proving them wrong, just refusing to let them define who you are. Your story isn't over. No matter how dark it feels right now, no matter how many people have told you no, no matter how many doors have been slammed in your face, no matter how many times you've been grabbed, judged, dismissed, ignored, or humiliated, your story is still being written, and the next chapter starts the moment you decide you're worth fighting for. The moment you decide their judgment doesn't get to be the final word. Don't give up. Don't let them win. Don't let the cruelty of the world turn you cruel. Don't let the hardness of life make you hard. Stay soft where it matters. Stay open. Stay caring, because that's where your power is, not in becoming what they think you are, but in remaining who you know you can be. Marcus's story isn't unique. There are thousands of kids like him. Millions, kids who have lost everything. Kids who sleep in places that aren't homes. Kids who go to bed hungry and wake up scared. Kids who have talent and potential and dreams, but no one to see them. No one to believe in them. No one to give them the chance they need. But every once in a while, someone does. Someone like Richard. Someone like Nina. Someone like Carol. People who remember what it was like to need help. People who understand that the measure of a society isn't how it treats its most powerful, but how it treats its most vulnerable. People who see a kid who's been knocked down and offer a hand up instead of another kick. Be that person. If you can, if you have the power, if you have the resources, if you have the platform. Be the person who notices, who helps, who gives someone a chance when no one else will, because you might be saving more than just a life. You might be saving the person that life was meant to become. And if you're the one who needs help, the one who's struggling, the one who feels like you're drowning and no one can see you, hold on. Just a little longer. Keep swimming, keep fighting, keep caring. Your Richard is out there. Your Nina, your Carol, the person who will see you, really see you, and decide you're worth the investment, worth the risk, worth believing in. Until then, believe in yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because if Marcus could do it, if he could survive losing everything and still care enough to wipe a smudge off a car that didn't belong to him, then you can survive whatever you're facing. You can keep going, you can keep trying, you can keep becoming. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning. 5 years passed, 5 years of work, of learning, of growing. Marcus finished his technical degree with honors, spent his days in the service bays, his nights studying engineering principles, thermodynamics, materials science. He learned not just how to fix cars, but how they were designed, how every component worked together, how small changes could create massive improvements. Richard kept his promise. Promoted Marcus to service manager at 21, the youngest in the company's history. Some of the older mechanics resisted at first, questioned whether someone so young could lead them. But Marcus didn't lead with authority, he led with competence, with respect, with the same care he'd shown that day when he'd wiped down a McLaren that didn't belong to him. He remembered everyone's name, asked about their families, listened when they had suggestions, gave credit where it was due, and slowly the resistance faded. They saw what Richard had seen. That Marcus wasn't just skilled. He was someone who genuinely cared about the work, about the people, about doing things right. On Marcus's 22nd birthday, Richard called him into his office. "Sit down," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Marcus sat. Richard pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "Open it." Marcus opened the folder. Inside were documents. Legal documents, papers with his name on them. He scanned the pages, his heart starting to pound. "What is this?" "Partnership agreement," Richard said. 5% ownership in the company. "Not a gift, you've earned it. The way you've transformed the service operations, the customer satisfaction scores, the efficiency improvements, you've earned it." Marcus couldn't speak. 5%. Of a company that operated 17 dealerships across 3 states. He looked up at Richard, his eyes burning. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Richard said. "Just keep doing what you're doing, keep being you." Marcus signed the papers with shaking hands. That night he drove to the cemetery where his mother was buried. He'd been there every month for the past 5 years, brought flowers, cleaned the headstone, sat and talked to her, telling her about his life, about the things he was learning, about the man he was becoming. He sat down in the grass, his back against her headstone, and looked up at the stars. "We made it, Mom," he said quietly. "I don't know if you can hear me, I don't know if it works like that. But if you can, I want you to know we made it. You worked so hard for me, sacrificed so much, and I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to keep making you proud. Every single day." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees around the cemetery. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself cry, not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude. From the weight of 5 years of struggle finally paying off. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the lobby of a new building. A building he'd designed. A nonprofit organization. The Marcus Chen Automotive Foundation. Named after his mother, whose last name he'd kept even though everyone assumed Marcus was his first name only. The foundation's mission was simple: to provide training, equipment, and opportunities to young people interested in automotive careers, especially those who'd been overlooked, dismissed, told they didn't belong. The opening day, Marcus stood at a podium in front of a crowd of supporters, donors, and 20 teenagers who'd been accepted into the first program cohort. He looked at their faces, saw himself in them, saw the hunger, the hope, the fear that maybe this was too good to be true, that maybe someone would realize they'd made a mistake and take it away. "I'm not going to tell you this will be easy," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I'm not going to promise that if you work hard, everything will work out, because that's not always true. Sometimes you can do everything right and still lose, still suffer, still struggle. Life isn't fair, it's not designed to be fair." He paused, looking at each of them. "But here's what I can promise. In this building, you will be seen. You will be respected. You will be given every tool, every resource, every opportunity to succeed. Not because of where you come from. Not because of who your parents are. Not because someone thinks you deserve it, but because you're here, because you showed up, because you care enough to try." The room was silent. 6 years ago, I was homeless. I'd lost my mother. I'd lost my home. I was sleeping under an overpass, eating food from dumpsters, trying to survive one day at a time. And I walked into a car dealership because I wanted to see something beautiful, wanted to stand next to something perfect. And I got grabbed, got humiliated, got thrown out. He saw some of the kids nodding. They understood. They'd been there, different circumstances, same feeling. But someone saw me differently. Someone gave me a chance. And that chance changed everything. So now I'm giving you the same chance, the same opportunity, the same belief that you are worth investing in. That your potential matters, that your dreams are valid." Marcus stepped back from the podium. "Welcome to the Marcus Chen Automotive Foundation. Let's build something together." The applause was thunderous. Richard stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, a smile on his face. Nina was there too, and Carol. All the people who'd helped Marcus when he needed it most. All the people who'd seen him when he was invisible to everyone else. After the ceremony, after the photos and the handshakes and the thank yous, Marcus stood alone in the workshop. Brand new equipment lined the walls, tools that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Workstations set up for 20 students, everything they would need to learn, to practice, to grow. He thought about that day in the dealership, about David's hand on his neck, about the way everyone had stared, about how small he'd felt, how worthless, and he thought about the man who'd stepped in, who'd seen past the worn-out shoes and the scared expression to the kid underneath. The kid who just wanted to fix something, to make something better, to care about something worth caring about. "Thank you," Marcus whispered to the empty room, to Richard, to his mother, to everyone who'd believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. "Thank you." And in that moment, standing in a workshop full of possibility, surrounded by tools that would shape the next generation of mechanics and engineers and dreamers, Marcus understood something. The story wasn't about him. It was never about him. It was about what happens when one person decides to help another, when one person sees potential where others see problems, when one person extends a hand instead of pointing a finger. It was about the ripple effect of kindness, about how one act of decency can change not just one life, but dozens, hundreds. Because every kid who walked through the foundation's doors would remember how they were treated, would remember that someone believed in them. And maybe someday when they had the power, they'd do the same for someone else. And the cycle would continue, on, building something better, something kinder, something worth believing in. That's the real story, not Marcus's rise from homelessness to success, but the chain of compassion that made it possible. Richard helping Marcus, Marcus helping these kids helping others in the future. An unbreakable chain of human decency that proves, again and again, that the world isn't just cruel, that people aren't just selfish, that hope isn't naive. Sometimes all it takes is one person, one moment, one decision to see someone differently, to give them a chance, to believe in them when no one else will. That's all, that's everything. So be that person if you can. And if you can't, if you're the one who needs help, hold on, keep going, keep caring, your moment is coming, your person is out there, your chance will arrive. And when it does, grab it, work for it, earn it. Then turn around and give it to someone else. That's how we change the world, not through grand gestures or perfect systems, but through small acts of courage, through seeing people who have been made invisible, through caring when it costs us something, through refusing to accept that suffering is inevitable and help is impossible. One person, one moment, one chance. That's all it takes to change everything. Don't give up. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning.